Hi, I'm Andy Acton.
And I'm Chris Strevens.
This is Dentology, the Business of Dentistry podcast. A very, very enjoyable conversation with Rasnaam there. And I think it took me back. We haven't started a business for quite a while. We've had extensions of things we've done, but I mean started something that,
Brand fresh, new.
wasn't there. And you really had to start from the ground up with a blank piece of paper.
FTA law.
Yeah. And that was 2016. Yeah, that was some time ago now. Yeah, we do lots of things that build on what we already do. But he's doing a hard thing, starting a new business.
It's relentless.
But it's not just a new business where there's an established market. He's actually doing something where there isn't really a space with other people operating in.
No, it's a challenge, isn't it? I think it just goes to show that whole thing that it is a no-brainer. Dentstock, have a look at the notes. But say it's hard to get people to even accept a no-brainer, to understand how it works and to feel whether they can change. Yeah. It's just hard work.
I felt for him because, like I say, I think the difference is it's moving into, you're almost having to create a new market as well as create a new business.
Yeah.
And that's challenging. But to his credit, he's putting everything into it and he's working hard.
Yeah, and he's pushing away. He's relentless.
And when you hear about the benefits that come from that, he articulates it well. No,
yeah,
really enjoyable, really good conversation, and nice to hear about that as a business.
Sort of inspirational.
Yeah, I was going to say, but also just hear about what's involved in having to do that as well.
Yeah,
great episode. Well, we are here yet again.
Yeah.
We have another
Monday morning cup of tea sorted.
Yeah, Monday morning cup of tea, 7:00. I enjoy doing these. This is one of the we have a very varied life in what we do, but when it comes to podcast day, I'll to it.
Yeah, just done my 10-mile run.
Out of this episode, you need to find the facts from the fiction. We'll drop a few bits of fiction in on the way. You can find out what the fiction is.
That 10-mile run might be one of them.
But the thing is, this episode is soon after the London Marathon.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Actually, yeah. I could have been running.
Watching some of the heroic efforts of people running that distance and the camaraderie and the spirit of London on that day it draws you in.
Yeah, it does.
It draws you in.
It's a bit like dentistry.
Nicely done.
Nicely done. Segue in.
Nicely done. So today we have a guest, as we always do. Well, we don't always do, but we mostly do.
That's true.
We mostly do. And we have Rasnaam Tiwana joining us. And Rasnaam is the founder and CEO of Dentstock, a procurement service that helps independent dental practices and small to medium-sized groups streamline their purchasing. Welcome, Rasnaam. How are you?
Yeah, hello, Rasnaam.
Happy Monday. Thanks, guys, for having me on. I'm doing great, thanks.
Good. It's good to see you. It's good to see you. Our relationship started just over a year ago. It was back in Florida. We were both over in Florida for a conference, and it was great to meet you then. But doing the preparation for this episode, something occurred to me that we had some great conversations and we had a really good time, but we didn't have to chat about you as a person, your early years, your childhood. And we always like to start our episodes in that way. So can we roll back to those early years and give a sense of what the young Rasnaam was like and what your family and childhood was?
The young Rasnaam.
100%. I'd probably say like a quiet kid who was okay at everything, not particularly amazing. Grew up in West London, in Southall for the first 10 years. I'd say fairly traditional Punjabi household, big focus on working hard at school and the idea that it'd lead to me going to university. My parents were quite supportive. My dad was more of the parent who encouraged a sense of humour and culture, and mum was more about education. And we were fortunate enough to travel quite a bit because of my dad's job with British Airways. And we were exposed to all sorts of different cultures and had a great understanding of life and seeing people who genuinely didn't have much but were quite happy. And my parents worked full time to send my sister and I to private school. And from a young age, we just understood that work was a thing that everyone just did. And that was what I saw growing up. I was okay academically in my younger years. Not particularly kind of sporty, not particularly musical, kind of tried everything and nothing really stuck till I got into my old years. and then we shifted over to Buckinghamshire after the 11 plus, and then I think I began to find myself a little bit more, even though I hate that term. I think I started to find people who I enjoyed hanging out with, found a sport which I enjoy, which is rowing, and that was quite like a unique thing to be doing.
Rowing?
Through school, and I think I began to find myself. However, academically, I kind of switched off and stopped paying attention by the time it came around to a key point, which was my A-levels. And the idea was all my older cousins and my older sister had gone to university, and it came to a point where university was now a expensive task, and I was unsure what I wanted to go and study. I didn't really fancy paying £60,000 a year to go, £60,000 over 3 years to go and party and learn something I didn't really enjoy. So that was kind of my childhood, and it was a turning point where I possibly didn't work as hard as I could have, but I now knew I would have to work incredibly hard
What
to
did
do
your
well.
mum and dad think about that?
At first, they were just more concerned that I wasn't going to university.
Yeah.
And I think there was always that mindset of, he's doing it okay in school, he'll obviously go on that path. And it took them a couple of years to adapt to that fact. But once I started doing well at work, it was like, okay, it's fair enough that you don't go to university, but I then had the understanding that this was now my adult life. It was only really me in charge of everything that happened next. But it did truthfully take them a few years. But they were supportive once they understood that if I did go to university, I wasn't sure what I wanted to go and study. I might drop out, and actually the commitment is quite big in doing so.
So what did you do after A-levels?
So I got a job with the NHS, and it was just booking appointments, doing rotas in a hospital. I was quite good at just almost switching off and just doing the same repetitive task. And I'd just be able to just crack through big waiting lists and just booking appointments, learn how to answer the phone, which was quite a key skill I think you have to learn in
underrated
the
skill
healthcare journey. And on from there, quickly got myself a promotion, doing more validation work. And I've really got my head around Excel, how to use Excel really well. And I was enjoying what I was doing, and I didn't really see myself turning to go to university. And I jokingly still say I am on a gap year, because I still kind of said to my parents, okay, I might go at some point. And that's where I've ended up now.
I think what is interesting is we've kind of gone through different phases. In the, there was a period where some people went to university. So of my generation, very few people went to university. The people who went to university are those that knew they had to get a professional qualification to pursue a career. So it was the medics, the dentists, the vets, the pharmacists. Not many people went to university to do kind of vocational type stuff. And then we went into a sort of 15, 20-year window where it was completely unacceptable not to go to university. And that's where you get people doing degrees, which frankly are going to have very limited value.
Elvis.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But you could do a Beatles degree in Liverpool, couldn't you, John Moore's? Yeah. And I think what happened is in that period, we ended up with a significant number of people that did 3 years plus a lot of debt, but it didn't necessarily further their career. But the professionals, it still continued. I think what's interesting about you, and we're seeing this shift, I think, swing back, where through my experience, the people who tend to have done very well in life are those that have a broad range of skills. This is on the business side of life, a broad range of skills, but particularly good at communication skills. Human psychology puts it into kind of a category, but just understanding people, just being able to read people and get on with people well. Those people tend to do very well. And what you were saying about getting on the phone, answering the phone, you kind of had a mini MBA in life just by starting work and doing different things. And arguably that's more valuable in terms of developing a young Rasnaam from where you were to where you are now than perhaps going and doing a 3-year degree in something that wasn't going to be particularly interesting to you.
And then throughout my kind of career, I've learned a heck of a lot, and I was like, I knew I'd only stay in a job for about a year or two, and it was, if I had learned everything I truly felt I had learned in that job role, I was very quickly trying to see what to go and do next. And when COVID hit, I was about to start a new job, and I was concerned that actually I wasn't sure if that job would survive going into what was coming up. And I went, I'm probably better off jumping ship than staying where I am and just being put onto furlough. And I was like, okay, we're just going to jump in. It was absolutely a good move, but I didn't end up doing much for that year because everything was cancelled in terms of projects and work.
And was that move into dentistry?
That was departing the NHS to go work for the Royal College of Physicians, and it was a project management job. And I enjoyed what I learned, but I knew I kind of capped out what I would have learned at my previous job pretty quickly. But it was a risk definitely worth taking, and actually because we weren't super busy, I got to do a lot more self-improvement and personal development during that time as well.
It's a lot, really, because you're young, aren't you? You're still quite young. Are you mid-20s, if that?
Mid-20s, yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's kind of funny when you listen to what you've done.
Yeah,
and,
you've done a
the
lot.
career you've done this. It's like, you're still only about 25.
So you did the NHS, Royal College of Physicians, and then what was your entry point into the wonderful profession of dentistry
that we all love?
Yeah,
Dentistry.
I then went to a digital healthcare startup for 2 years. Enjoyed that. Felt like there wasn't really any promotion opportunities towards the end of that. Felt I'd worked for quite a while. I'd take a career break. So left my job literally, I think it was a week before 2 years. That was the longest job I'd ever had. And I'd enjoyed the work I had done there, helping people with obesity and type 2 diabetes. Took this career break, which didn't last very long, and I saw a job post on Facebook for a local area, and it was asking for some extra support with some courses, and I said, hi, I'm interested in this, thinking I'd do like a day a week, I just earn a little bit of cash, do whatever I wanted to the rest of the time, and they asked for my CV, and I sent it across and go, I can do anything else you kind of would like, and it was a dental practice called Bespoke Smile. This isn't their normal hiring routine, by the way. It was kind of just an entry point to a conversation. And they were interested in my experience working for a fast-growing digital healthcare startup and what I could provide to them. And I kind of upsold myself quite a bit during this call. And ended up walking into a job 3 days a week for this practice. And I was almost put off by dentistry because my mum had worked in dental and still does, and I kind of wanted to avoid things that my parents had done, so I kind of didn't really feel that enthusiastic about it at first.
Okay.
But I was kind of convinced in by what I could bring in and what I could help them with. So even though I was on the back foot and they wanted me for a full-time job, I was very keen to stay part-time. So we had this back and forth for quite a bit. But that was how I fell into dentistry, utterly by chance, I would say.
And I suppose that's the business of dentistry, isn't it? It's interesting. It's not dentistry; it's the business of dentistry.
And also
where you excelled.
Yeah, your entry point. Bespoke Smiles. That's Dr. Sam Jethwa. That's a very well-oiled, high-end business. That's not your kind of mainstream everyday dental practice. So in some ways your view of dentistry becomes skewed from day one.
Must have been very convincing in the telephone interview.
Yes, because it's quite that's a very particular practice.
Yeah.
What did it reveal to you when you joined that business, given the experience you'd had prior to that outside of dentistry? What were the peculiarities or insights that you took away from stepping into dentistry with fresh eyes?
Yeah. I'd say, even though it's an appointment, to me, I still treated it as an appointment. And in my previous job, even though it was a NHS contracts we were providing, we'd still really focus on every single touch point. And that's where Sam had built an excellent workflow, but it was the fact that we had to rely on other people's technology to help us, and that was where there was a lot of inefficiencies of admin, and the team was spending their time on tasks which could have been streamlined. And that was my kind of key takeaway of, even though this is an exceptionally well-oiled high-end practice, there's still a lot of unnecessary work that people have to spend so much time doing, and it's taking them away from speaking to patients and performing tasks which have got a significantly higher ROI. And that was my kind of key first step. And it was, there's a lot of technology, but actually things don't work together well. And it's
That's a lesson
just
for a lot of people, isn't it? Really? It's that duck analogy, isn't it? All looks very calm on the surface, but underneath there's lots of paddling. And I think that's great, isn't it? But it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's sort of obvious, but it's not really, because most people don't actually review it or understand it. So it's that sort of ability. You've obviously got that mind, which is, Rasnaam, is that ability to look at something and sort of almost deconstruct it or put it in so as you can then say, right, well, okay, you're going to A to Z, but you're actually going via, F or whatever, rather than putting it in a logical process. It's a real skill, I think, that you either have or you don't.
Do you think it's getting harder to run a dental practice? Because one of the things that Chris and I have recently launched something called the Principals Club, and one of the driving forces behind that is that it's hard to be the owner and runner of a dental practice, because you're not necessarily equipped with the business skills to do that, and you also need to spend an amount of time doing clinical work which locks you away in your surgery. And do you think that whole mixture of skills and demands is getting harder for independent practice owners?
I think it 100% is, because you now have to understand and juggle a number of different kind of projects within your practice, from clinical to the business to the accounting side to marketing to people management. And I think it's a small business problem of, you suddenly have to do quite a bit within your own business. So it definitely has gotten more challenging. And I think that's where a lot of practice owners struggle to find the time and to even have the understanding and knowledge. And it's often where providers and suppliers can take advantage of the fact that a practice owner doesn't truly understand what that service is or what the expected outcomes should be to have a idea of the impact.
And they don't have the time. That's the thing. I know we've said to so many people, and you've seen it, Rasnaam, as well. This whole thing, you're actually genuinely running a business that even at the small end is probably 350. The smallest practice we probably see nowadays is maybe 350, but that's still roughly 30 grand a month with a team on board that you're spending, I would say, 90% of your working day, 95% actually working in someone's mouth. To then be able to have the time, which the only other place you've got the time is in the evenings or the weekends, and then that sort of means you've got no family time or any downtime. So it is a real challenge.
But also, I think as well, you're then in a limited amount of time, you're needing to do things that you're not trained and equipped for. When the dentists are in the surgery, they've got incredible technical capability and skills to do that. When you step out, and it might be in the evening, you're working on your marketing strategy or your operations or trying to streamline a process, but you're not really trained or engineered in a way to do that well. And anything we do that we're not particularly good at tends to take longer.
And more stressful.
Yeah, so you've not got much time. It takes you longer. You don't necessarily get a great outcome. It adds to your stress.
And you do exactly the same as someone else did. So it's hard work.
You can see why. And we'll come on in a minute into sort of some of the things that you're working on that can help people with that. Just in terms of the start, there was a shift to you, wasn't there? Because during COVID, you started to see this shift in sort of digital healthcare services, the demand for digital healthcare services. And it's funny because for good reason, we characterise COVID as being this terrible thing, and it was. But the more people you talk to, you see how many innovations and new ideas came out of it. Dentology came out of COVID. We used to be on Clubhouse, that audio only platform, and then Dentology
Does it
kind
still
of.
exist?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yes.
Say again?
I think it
Wow.
does. There was that slow shift, and I think I was joining a company which did diabetes education and obesity management through a phone application and telephone. Traditionally, that had always been commissioned as a in-person service, and the uptake was exceptionally high because you didn't have to take time off work. You didn't have to scribble down on paper the food you'd consumed. You'd simply just take pictures on a application, and the clinical results were absolutely fantastic. NHS commissioners wanted to commission services which could actually run, and I could see the shift, I could see the impact, and it was all going in the right direction. It was just I didn't feel like I was going to learn or develop with the company much further. We were one of the first companies helping NHS patients access Ozempic on a NHS program. This was back in 2021-22.
Wow.
So it was quite exciting to be part of that. And I could see services changing, transforming, not having to have people coming into a hospital, into a clinic to have access to healthcare. So it's quite transformative and impactful in that sense.
So when did the spark for Dentstock come? And kind of talk us through kind of how that came about, and what Dentstock is, and how that kind of helps dental practices.
It's not a music festival for dentists.
No, because what you just described is kind of almost you're getting interested in your viewing how we're bringing together technology and healthcare services for the benefit, in your example, of the patient. But you've gone by bringing together technology and healthcare services, but for the benefit of the practice owner. So what is Dentstock, and what was the kind of the thought process that got you to a stage where you launched it?
Yeah, interesting to know where to start.
So we're a procurement consultancy helping practices on their purchasing. The idea came about as helping Bespoke Smile improve their processes. We'd support the team on a number of key areas, and procurement was something which I'd always had an interest in. While I was at Bespoke Smile, I was also working a day or two for one of the biggest property developers in the UK, and that's where I learned about procurement. And clinical supply costs are quite key to a practice. So we arranged some preferential pricing with suppliers, but very quickly the preferential prices kind of disappeared. And that was just how distributors operated. And on the conference where we first met, I saw technology that could help ordering become quick and easy between a number of suppliers. And at that conference, I just wanted to take away something back to the UK in terms of just information. I was probably one of the more junior people at that event, and I could kind of tell, just absorb information, being able to hang out with individuals like yourself.
Old people, that's what it means.
It's impactful. You're
Thanks,
wise
Rasnaam.
people.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah.
So that was how it came together.
Mature, experienced people.
And I was introduced to Brad Freeman, who runs a company called Source Club in the USA, who run a similar group purchasing organization. So trying to bring that concept to the UK market to have a significant impact on how practices do their purchasing, and finding them considerable cost savings as part of that as well.
So we know time is our most valuable asset, and I guess where you're going down the route is there's a cost saving to be had. But what about the time? What does the average dental practice look like in terms of how this is managed at the moment? And are there some tips?
Or is it managed?
Well, yeah. And are there tips, whether it's using your platform or however, that people could improve how they manage their supplies?
How does it work, I suppose, wouldn't you say? How does it work? Tell people how it works. Because I think we think it's valuable to any practice. You know, we have no We don't own shares in Rasnaam's company, but what we do think is that anything that makes the dental practice easier
and more
to
efficient,
manage, more efficient and more profitable, that is where we have an interest in more profitable practices. So tell us how it sort of works, Rasnaam.
So currently practices do their purchasing either by calling up their account rep, purchasing on a website. Some practices will go to a single supplier for the vast majority of their clinical supplies, or they'll be clicking through tabs trying to price compare. Essentially, we audit all of a practice's purchasing for clinical supplies, and we have our own pre-negotiated pricing with suppliers as well, so they can take advantage of that pricing, and we analyze their purchasing to find additional cost savings, so they can go and make a few small changes, and these are only to areas which aren't clinically sensitive, and they're areas where we can help them find a 50 to 60% cost saving in some cases. Wow. And then we bring it together by providing procurement software, bringing our suppliers and their suppliers onto a singular platform. And the time saving is quite big. We've had practices who will spend an hour or two doing the ordering every single time, and it now takes them 15 or so minutes. And that includes going around the practice to check what stock they have to go and purchase.
See, I think that time saving, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think the money is great. But I think the time saving, the one thing that we hear time and time again is that everybody's so busy. There's no more time to do anything. But if you've got the magic wand that can actually release time, I think that is huge, coupled with the fact that you're going to buy your suppliers at a lower rate. But I think freeing people up, because there's this debate at the moment, and kind of we're straying off a little bit here around kind of AI taking jobs, technology is going to, no one's going to be working, everyone's going to be sitting at home. But actually the way I see it is what it should be able to do is it should be able to unlock lots of the mundane and repetitive tasks that humans do that they don't have to do anymore, which then frees those people up to spend more time delivering exceptional patient care. And it sounds to me like your solution, whilst there's a cost saving, which is amazing, that freeing up of time to enable the team to spend more time delivering exceptional patient care, that really is magical.
And that has got a great impact, and we haven't even talked about the cost savings. So generally it's between 15 to 20% of their current spend. However, we have found even up to 29% of their current spend, and that was £25,000 for a practice, which is super easy for them to go and realise. So financially, it's got
your
a great
bottom line,
impact.
isn't it? I think that's the great thing. Is it's not like you have to do any extra business. The answer is you just rationalise your purchasing, and boom, you've got extra profit on your bottom line, which, from a valuation point of view, is an extra value.
And this is a relatively new business for you, Rasnaam, isn't it? And we were talking before we went live about the challenges of setting up a new business, because I think what you're introducing is a relatively new concept in the UK. So everybody already has a system in place, and it might not be fit for purpose, it might be clunky, but they have a system. So I imagine you're encountering resistance of people changing and adapting, which I guess is very much around their mindset, leadership, and how they manage their team. But what are the challenges that you've encountered in starting a new business yourself?
So I'd say the challenges are, at first you have a concept and you have to go and explain it and share it to understand if people would be interested. And that was kind of the first thing where you sound a little bit crazy at kind of first. And then you have to go and do this for a number of weeks, and that was cool till you kind of go, I've spent 3 months sounding like a crazy person chatting to practice owners, and that was a different a mindset for me, as I'd never really been in sales, and that was quite a unique first couple of months. And then bringing a new concept to the market, which is disruptive to how people have done their purchasing, has a number of different challenges. Being able to get a buy-in of suppliers is quite key. And throughout it, I'd say my biggest takeaway is everything's going to take twice as long as you initially thought. And once I got my head around that, and I'd been pre-warned, and I was like, I'll be fine at just cracking through things. But often it isn't just on our side. You have to take into consideration all the different stakeholders. And I'd say that was my biggest learning of the first 6 months prior to even having the first customer on board, was just don't overthink how easy it's going to be on just the time front.
It's relentless.
Yeah. And I think there's a significant difference between thinking about doing it, writing spreadsheets and documents about how you're going to do it, and actually physically being in the room, talking to people about it, jumping on the phone and trying to convince people that you should try my thing. It's not an easy thing to do.
And also, a good idea doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work, does it? You know, it might be a great idea, but it still doesn't work unless you actually push it. And, you know, I'm trying to think of examples, like I was thinking DeLorean is probably not a great example for especially young people, but there's so many things that are great ideas but never quite get there because either they're people forget this relentlessness and persistence that you have to do to just push forward.
Has the advancement of digital dentistry and the adoption of tech within dentistry helped you, and at what level are we at? Because you're kind of talking about having a tech platform in essence, to release time, drive down costs, and improve profitability. Where are we at based on your experience in terms of the general understanding of how tech can help a modern dental practice?
I think there's been tons of investment on the clinical workflows, and we're now starting to look at optimizing the back office. But I think the technology is ahead of how people can use it in some cases. And I think that's what holds people back from having these significant time savings. And they're just performing a repetitive task, which actually could be easily automated by technology that it existed 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And I think that's what holds back a lot of practices. And it's just about being analytical and just asking, why are we completing X task? And I think that often uncovers that we're often asking our team to complete things just so the owner of the business has a visibility rather than trusting that task is truthfully completed.
It's a slightly weird juxtaposition, isn't it? That on the clinical side, you've got digital dentistry with scanners and 3D printers and people like SprintRay, you know, right at the front end and pushing the limitations of what can be done under the category of digital dentistry. But then when you then start talking about digital business, there seems to be this disconnect between they're seeing all the benefits clinically of how they can get more repeatable outcomes, digital workflows, standardization, you know, quicker turnaround, lower delivery costs, all the benefits that come with digital dentistry. But that doesn't, based on what you were saying, that hasn't necessarily transitioned over onto the business side just yet. It's funny.
There's a lot of practice.
Oh, sorry. I suppose it's always a little bit of, we've always done it this way.
Very dangerous phrase.
100%. And I think there's a lot of practice who use Excel as like a tracker, but actually their teams don't understand how to use Excel well to get anything out of it. So they're just inputting in information which exists elsewhere just into Excel just because that's what they've always done. And I'm like, this information exists within your PMS or in your accounting software. You could look at that rather than inputting in things twice. And I think that's had a big impact on people because they've spent an hour a day, and that impact, when combined to the whole year, is you've basically spent 3 weeks a year inputting info into an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah. And then it's what you do with it, I suppose. That's the other thing we quite often find, isn't it? We get practices, you know, they monitor phone calls, they record phone calls, they new patient consultations, whatever. But the answer is they never actually get the time to review them.
And that's the thing, isn't it?
And they get all this data and no one does anything with it. But it's like mad.
But you're back to that same problem, aren't you? That no one's got any more time.
No,
so
that's right. Yeah,
you can give somebody loads of reports and say, look, here's all this data, which is amazing. But how? I mean, if you did, let's assume you had the time to sit down to review it, to work out what it was actually telling you. You then might have a training issue, or you've got an implementation plan of how you use that. So
you got time to do that?
Yeah.
No.
It's mad. Rasnaam, I know it's still very early days for you, but if I gave you a magic wand and we could wind back 6 months, what would you do differently?
Great question. I think I would have done more around spreading the word of what was coming up and having more of a period of a launch.
Right.
and more of a awareness campaign around that. And I'd say that would be my
Pre-positioning
biggest
almost.
takeaway. I think I underestimated the impact it would have, and it was great to have inquiries just flying in, and that was super exciting to see. I think planning that stage a little bit earlier on would have been more impactful.
But then also don't give yourself too hard a time. You know, you're a solopreneur. You know, you're a one person business in the early days, trying to get an idea off the ground. And I also think that quite often we have to go through the process we go through to kind of have that learning.
Yeah, a bit of pain. I think
Yeah.
you have to have a bit of pain
You kind of have to go through that, and that underestimation of the significant difference between people saying yes, it's a good idea, but buying your thing.
Yeah, to actually buying one.
There is a mile of a leap required.
We always credit, don't we? You know, Andy and I have we've purchased, built, sold businesses, but some of them haven't really worked. And unfortunately for us, whilst they might have cost us a little bit of money, they haven't, you know, they haven't knocked us down. But it was a great. I can't. What was the one that we did? We built a business, and we felt we were a little bit like King Midas, weren't we? I mean, like, hey, everything we touched turns to gold, and then we did something, and it turned to lead, and basically it was like, what a terrible disaster that was. But I think it was a good learning curve for us, wasn't it? Because it made us realise that sometimes we just get it wrong, or sometimes it doesn't work, or sometimes you didn't get it right. But it's that persistence. I think you just have to keep going.
What's your perfect client, Rasnaam? What sort of practice does this really kind of zing for?
I'd say it really excels for independent practices and small groups who've got a few chairs, 2 or 3 or above, who are doing high value treatments included in their mix. That's our key clientele, where we're always able to find significant cost savings for
Most of them. Most practices.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
So your market's quite large in terms of the people that you can help. And I guess the last couple of years there has been an erosion of profit for lots of practices. Inflation hit wages, utilities went up. I think generally the costs of most things have increased. That hasn't always been matched at the top end with them increasing patient charges.
No,
so that's had a compression on profitability. So I guess anybody that sits on the bottom half of the P&L and can help them contain costs, and that's where you're sitting, should be of interest to a practice owner.
I mean, it's a no-brainer for. I mean, as I say, we don't have any vested interest in it, but it's a no-brainer, isn't it, for a review?
Yeah.
To have a look and see what opportunities could be there. And I know that you're then stuck with people's inertia and, well, I've always done it this way and stuff like that. But it is a bit of a no-brainer, really, that says, look, hang on, have a look. Let's see what we can save. Because people do it all the time with car insurance, or they should do, with car insurance and switching utilities, which even now is coming back in. So why not do it with something like this? And, you know, I bet you that when the Sky bill comes in, they might phone the Sky people, or car insurance, they'll go to Money Supermarket. It's a bit like Money Supermarket for materials and bits, isn't it? I just don't understand why people don't do it, really.
It's our extra kind of support in analysing purchasing. So for the average practice, we're analysing between 300 to 800 items per year, and often there can be an over appreciation of buying certain, for example, brand name consumables. Often there are greater cost savings in just switching out that product, and it's our combined pre-arranged pricing, our analysis of your purchasing, and the software that truly brings everything together. So there have been attempts to have like marketplaces for clinical supplies. However, you're on your own there to go and purchase what you feel is right for you. Our analysis of looking at hundreds of practices pricing has given us great insights, and that's where a lot of the cost savings come from. Is just actually, if you consider changing X product, and these are only things which are non-clinically sensitive, so they're easy to get the buy-in of the entire team, and in some cases, we've saved like a singular practice £6,000 a year just on gloves, because they were purchasing something super expensive.
Wow.
Taking them to our pre-arranged pricing on gloves has had a great cost saving, and they're tried and tested products as well.
That's £500 a month, isn't it? I mean, and the nonsense of that is that's profit.
Yeah.
So then you gross that up to,
Well, I was
if you're on a 50% margin, that means you've got to do an extra 12 grand just to save that. It's just like,
Yeah, that's impressive. Rasnaam, when you were doing the introduction of the of your early days, you just sort of glossed over. I got into rowing. Do you still row today? What did that? Is that in a boat with other people, or is it on your own? Talk us through that.
So I started rowing in high school. Fortunate enough to pass my 11 plus, which my parents were very stressed about. Got into grammar school, and I got a choice of 3 schools, and it was the school I ended up picking was the one that had the most interesting extracurricular. So they had like a climbing wall, a swimming pool, a gun range, and had a CCF. So I went on picking that school because it looks like it's the most interesting. And then my friends started to row, and they all seemed like they were having fun. And I was like, I'd prefer to hang out with them on the weekend, so I'll just give it a go. Being quite tall, it has advantageous purposes for rowing. So that's how I got into rowing. And people who row often aren't the best at like hand-eye coordination is like a common trait. And I kind of fitted into that stereotype quite well. And for me, it was a bit of a change. It was something to work hard at, something to enjoy. And I've rowed ever since. I took a small break for a few years, but I still do row. Due to work, I probably do a bit less training than previous years, but it's been a 6-day-a-week commitment.
Wow.
And it's quite a kind of an important part of how I spend my free time. And all my friends have rowed or do row. It's like a common trait. As you truly know how you sit with these people because you've seen them in the morning every day, 6 days a week. So I have rowed in crews. I've rowed in a single quite a bit, and I've been fortunate enough to travel with the sport as well. It's not the most diverse sport either, so it's great to be part of a small group within that side of the world.
wow, brilliant.
And I think sport is good for so many reasons, isn't it? You've got the physical thing, you've got the hobby, the social thing, but also just the mental well-being of kind of being, as particularly with rowing, kind of you're outdoors, you're with other people. It sounds like a great thing, but 6 days a week, that's a serious commitment.
It's become an amateur sport where everyone's trained more. So like the commitment to like doing okay at an event is you now have to do a fair bit of training.
Right, yeah.
But it's almost like it's just a way of life after a while of I know what I'm doing after work every day, or I know how I'm going to be getting up on the weekend. And it's just a great behaviour change, I'd say. I probably wasn't the most adept person at getting up in the morning. But like I'm still not, but I know I'm going to do it.
That sounds good. Is the diversity changing in rowing over the time you've been doing it, or is it pretty flat, would you say?
Slowly. I think it's a sport which has a image attached to it. And I think it will always have that. And
It's just kind of the Oxford-Cambridge boat race style.
Yeah.
Posh.
posh.
Yeah.
Very posh. I think that is slowly changing, but it isn't a area of the world where people are trying to be as inclusive as they could be. I think there is still that mentality to how clubs operate and encourage. It's also where these clubs are based. They're often in areas which are quite posh. They're not often in the right
And you need a
locations as well.
Don't you? I suppose you need a river or a pond, I suppose.
Yeah.
Or a lake, probably more than a pond.
Yeah.
I've got a pond, you can put a boat in it.
Fabulous. And just lastly, we need to ask you 2 questions. But before we get to these 2 questions, I understand that you were an extra in 2024 in what was a very famous television program, Saltburn. I've not seen Saltburn, but I know it hit the headlines for a particular scene towards the end. How did that come about? Have you got ambitions to be an actor?
Didn't have ambitions to be an extra. While I was at the Royal College of Physicians, slightly underutilised at work. I saw that they were looking for rowers for a different production, and I did like a day, and I quite enjoyed it. And I thought, I don't really want to be an actor, but it's cool to be on a film set and experience this. And off the back of that, I then did a week on a prisoner of war camp for a Masters of the Air, the Steven Spielberg special. And that was really cool because you got to dress up as a prisoner of war. You got to be in a prisoner of war camp near Chesham. And they had aircraft flying in overhead. They had tanks. There was buildings blowing up. And I was like, as a kid, you always want to be in a war film.
Yeah, definitely.
And I was like, box tick. And then I got the email to say, do you want to be in this thing called Saltburn? There wasn't a book, so I just said yes. And that was filmed at Oxford University. So I got to be an extra in that. And that was the last project I did. I don't think I'm doing any more. But it was just super interesting to see how they film things.
Wow. Yeah. And also, I think quite often we become more interesting when we have stories to tell, and they make for great stories. So, good. So we're now at the point where we do have two very serious questions for you. The first one being, you're a fly on the wall in a situation. Where are you and who's there?
I had to have a good think about this, and I've always enjoyed concepts which turn things on their head.
Oh, okay.
So in, I think it was 1880 or so, in Germany, they came up with the first concept of a healthcare package and a sickness package, and it was the first step towards universal healthcare. Being in that conversation, being like, how could we provide this service to people? And that's had a big catalyst on the world for the next 150 years, and it continues to. And a universal healthcare is something we in the UK take for granted quite a bit.
We do.
And I think just being that fly on the wall in that conversation, being like, but who's going to fund these services? Just being able to be like, have those people be like, we should do this. And there was probably always someone in the room going, how do we make this happen? Just being there for that conversation.
I think that's great. I suppose I'd never really dwelled on the concept that there would have been a time in history when there wasn't universal healthcare. I suppose I've always lived in the UK and we've always had the NHS. So you just don't kind of think that there would have been a point where someone said, wouldn't it be amazing if there was a facility that enabled a whole population to access healthcare in some form or other? And as a follow-up, you get the chance to meet somebody. So who would you like to sit down and have a conversation with, given the opportunity?
I had a really good think about this, and I was in the cold with a friend for a few hours. And we're not into celebrity culture. Although I've been an extra on a film set, I don't really watch a lot of TV or film. And the pair of us were like struggling. We're both fairly similar people. And we couldn't give a definitive answer because I'm a firm believer in don't meet your heroes because you might be disappointed. So just leave them as they are. But there's a few people on social media who I've enjoyed. A guy called Simon Squibb. He asks people what their dreams are, and then he tries to break down their dream into like simple steps to build their dream. I'd want to meet him, but then I almost also don't because I just enjoy the spectrum of him I have on the internet.
Yeah,
but that's like the closest I would say.
Right, yeah, he's very good. He's a real straight talking guy, isn't he?
100%.
Yeah, Rasnaam, it's been an absolute joy. Appreciate you making the time as well, because when you're starting a new business, one of the things that you did with your clients is freeing up time. And I know as somebody who's starting a business, there isn't much of that going around spare. So we appreciate your time this morning and genuinely good luck with it. Definitely give us the link. We can drop that in the episode at the bottom so people can click and find out a bit more about it. But yeah, keep chugging away. It sounds like it's a great project and it's going well so far.
Yeah, good stuff.
Thank you, guys.
Brilliant. Look after yourself, Raz.
Cheers, Raz.
Get well. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Dentology, where we discuss the business of dentistry. If you like what you heard, please do subscribe where you found this episode. That would be amazing. And also follow us on Instagram.